Howdy, y'all. You may have noticed that I am, what's the word I'm looking for? Early. And that is because using a new setup as you do. Wrong headphones. Using a new setup as you do, and I just want to make sure that everything is spectacular. So, let me go over here. See how it is over here. Hello, hello. See how it is. I think my volume is low. Let us change. Nope, that's not what I wanted to do. Howdy, howdy, howdy. I am currently going early because I wanted to test, alter audio stuff. I think I'm a bit low. Howdy, howdy, howdy. I am currently going early because I want to test, alter. So how's it sounding on your end? There we go. Where am I going with this? I had an idea. Wasn't a very good idea. So how's it sounding on your end? But it's an idea. Let's try this. Yeah, it seems like it's loud enough. Again, folks in the audience, if you can let me know if the sound is coming through and if the sound is good. Evening Blue, it's loud and noisy. Okay, well, let me... Again, folks in the audience, if you can let me know if sound is coming through. How about now? I thought it was too low, but apparently I... Howdy, Georg. Askin, Sea Lion. How are you all doing? How is it coming through now? I'm going to mute this over here. Alright, I am going to assume that it is going well until someone tells me otherwise. But I forgot something, so I'm going to go get it. I'm back. I realize that Toon is currently doing his normal scheduled thing, and normally I wouldn't want to butt in on that or try to compete with Toon. I know I would lose, but I wanted to still noisy. I wonder if like distractingly so, or because I wonder if it is my... I could try this. I've turned off the monitor, so maybe that'll clean it up. Audio is pretty low for you. Alright, well, I'm going to actually... Georg, while I definitely appreciate it, I'm wondering if it is in fact your system. So I put up the volume again. Um, so, so yes, Blue, if you can let me know whether or not it is in fact too low. If not, I can try to, or if it is, I can see about upping it some more. Anyway, so as I was saying, I know Tune is currently live, and normally I wouldn't want to compete with him in any way, particularly since apparently he is doing episode 2 of Witsit's Middle Ground series. I'm doing episode 1. I haven't really had time to keep up with Tune's channel, sadly. Sorry, Mike. But Michael. But so I don't know if he's done episode 1, but many voices, many different perspectives. So hopefully I can add something to it. But I'm not going to go into that until 11, when I said that I would actually start stream. I went early again because new setup. I wanted to make sure that all of the audio and visual and all that kind of good stuff works. In fact, let me do this. I am going to transition. Definitely not too loud, but acceptable. Thank you, Blue. So, whoops, that is not what I wanted to do. There we go.
Oh, in a world. All right, I think we're good. So, welcome to the first episode of Middle Ground. And obviously, pun title.
Just gonna let this play for a sec, and
you're not new to this channel,
I'm going to.
Then, we cover many things regarding cosmology and the Earth, and
it sounds a little
over
low
here we
to
don't just
me.
blindly believe what we were told about the Earth,
So
and we have 3 real big claims that the Earth is spinning and it's tilted, wobbling, and it's revolving around the sun as it shoots through space 500,000 miles per hour with the sun.
How does Austin sound?
And that entire solar system shoots through the galaxy at that 500,000, while the galaxy shoots 1.2 million through space. And there are actually more vectors than that, but so there's the idea that the Earth is moving all these different crazy, inconceivable speeds and vectors, but you can't feel it. And then there's the idea that the Earth is a sphere. It's curving at a specific rate, specific size. We know everywhere there is on the Earth. And then there is the claim that we are encapsulated in a vacuum, and we live in a pressurized system that's inside of a vacuum. And
excellent.
I called this middle ground
you can hear
because
him perfectly. So, egg salad.
Having the conversation.
All right. So we'll get into that later. Howdy, Professor Bell. And okay, I'm moving to a new office soon, and so right now my setup is a bit like my mic is over here, so my setup is a bit wonky. I thought I was going to be moving within the next couple weeks, or I thought I was going to be moving middle of this month, but it doesn't look like I'm going to be moving until the end of the semester. But anyway, that's really boring to talk about, so I am going to move on. So there were a couple of things I wanted to address prior to getting into Middle Ground episode 1. The first one is related to my discussion with Dr. Bennett, which I had sometime about a week or so ago. I can't remember. I've been busier than a prostitute on 2 whole-for-1 Saturdays, so I just can't seem to keep things in my mind as to when things were supposed to happen. Anyway, so I had this conversation with Dr. Bennett on Space Audit's channel, and I believe Austin was also broadcasting it on his own channel. The interesting thing about that, to start off with, is when I had the initial conversations with Dr. Bennett, one of the things that he specifically told our intermediary, which may in fact have been Sea Lion, but again, my memory sucks, is that he didn't really want a formal debate, and he didn't want a moderator. He just wanted to have a pleasant conversation between two people, and I'm all about that. That's what I want. That's what I have always subscribe or always told people that I want in this realm, is to meet with people who do not subscribe to the modern scientific viewpoint, particularly in astronomy and physics, and try to understand where they're coming from. So it surprised me that when I got onto the stream, that Witsit was there, and Witsit claimed to be a moderator. Granted, he didn't do a lot of moderation, and and any of that. I'm not really criticizing him in any way for that. It was just odd, because the whole I have this feeling of being gaslit through a lot of this, and that was kind of the first part of it, because I had to question. I was like, wait a minute, didn't Dr. Bennett tell me that he did not want a moderator, that he wanted to have just a simple conversation? So I'm like, all right, whatever. So long as it stays a conversation, I'm not gonna complain. And Austin basically did say that he would basically cut us off if we start rambling, which I thought was good, because I know I have diarrhea of the mouth, and I can talk with the best of them. So we had this conversation, and I do plan on, or my plan is to download it and basically chop it up into digestible chunks and repost it. It was not a great conversation, mainly because of ironically a lack of moderation. Howdy, you are Victoria. I'm not Victoria, but you are Victoria. In that we kept going round and round in circles, and so I was hoping that Witsit would do more of a job, or someone would do more of a job of cutting that conversation off and moving us along. I tried to do that a couple of different times, but I wasn't as successful as I wanted to be, because we just kept going over the same. He kept saying Newton's bucket. I kept saying that one frame does not determine another frame, essentially. So I'm not going to get into the weeds of that conversation, but I felt frustrated because we kept going around and around and around. But there are a couple of aspects of that conversation that I wanted to highlight. Particularly the thing that was most interesting to me is when he was talking about the age of the universe. I asked him what he thought the age of the universe was, and he quoted, I believe, somewhere between 4,000 to 5,000 years. Typical number for hardcore young Earth creationists. What I found to be most notable, however, is when I pressed him on where do you get that value, he said the historical record, and he referred to the Egyptians. Now, what I find interesting is that in every other case, when I've either talked to or listened to a young Earth creationist and they brought up a historical record, they go to the Bible. I mean, essentially, that's where the 4,000 to 5,000 year value comes from, is the genealogy of Christ. He didn't mention that, which I found to be interesting, because I also know that he is a Catholic apologist, so I know that he is has faith in God and is a Christian. So the fact that he didn't talk about it, I thought was notable. And then the third part of the conversation, I can't really remember. So apparently it was very notable to me. But there was this whole thing about kinematic and dynamic. And that I felt that we were definitely going around, because I could have sworn he keeps making the assertion that kinematics, the study of physics that is defined by kinematics, or that encompasses kinematics, cannot make predictions, which is just simply a false statement. But anyway, my whole point of this, see, I love talking, is that apparently right after I left, because I had a hard cutoff, I've been told that they discussed that conversation in terms of it being a debate. I don't debate science. At least not in this format. The debates that people have, that MC has, that Craig has, Flight to Flat Earth has, that you see on modern day debate, these are rhetorical debates. These are not scientific debates. These are essentially debates that include, well, I'm not going to go in that direction. I will not debate science in that format because it doesn't resolve anything. A scientific debate, when you were talking about a scientific debate, or when you want to have a scientific debate, you need to bring evidence. You need to bring quantitative evidence to the table so that both parties can look at the evidence, analyze the evidence, and go from there. There are no assertions. There are no, you cannot make P equals Q, therefore Y. All of this rhetorical, logical nonsense has no real place in a true scientific debate. Not to say that logic cannot be used, and I know I'm badly explaining this, but this whole thing about logical fallacies, you all know what how I feel about when people start using logical fallacies. This is not a place for us in scientific debate. I don't care about that because the debate is data driven. It's not whether or not you can out-logic the other person. It's not about whether or not you can make a more convincing rhetorical argument. It is based on whether or not the evidence that you have actually supports your claim better than the claim of your quote-unquote opponent. Scientific debate is not an us versus them, or it shouldn't be, in my opinion, adversarial. Ultimately, the goal is to determine which is the truth and to move forward from there. I suppose it could be said that is also the aim of these rhetorical debates about the shape of the earth and so forth. But again, I just wanted to clarify, I did not consider that a debate. I do not debate science in that format. If someone wishes to come to me and debate science, then they will need to come to me with more than simple thought experiments. You will need to come to me with published, or no, I will back that statement off. Come to me with data that has been analyzed, and we can discuss the results. If not, then I'm not going to debate you, because you do not have the proper tools for me to have a debate. We can have a conversation so that we can discuss these thought experiments that you might have and go from there. But you're not going to convince me of anything until you can actually supply me with a quantitative model that makes predictions that have been tested where I can see the results. So I don't debate science, at least not in this forum. Oh, the other thing that I wanted to it also goes to, I recently bought a book, and I think I made a stream on this. It's something entitled The Upside Down Astronomy, Upside Down Cosmology. Effectively, the author actually cites Austin in it as a source. And the thing that really sticks out to me was that, according to this author and according to Austin, whom I believe I've also heard him say, so I can't verify it, is that his assertion is that you do not need a replacement model in order to falsify another one. In science, practically, yeah, you do. I am a practical son of a bitch. My parents were both German on one side of their family. We are very pragmatic. If I cannot use a model to figure out what I want to figure out, then, or if I have no model, then what's the point of talking about it? Yes, classical mechanics, for example, is not the truth. Our best understanding at this point, at least from a non-quantum mechanical standpoint, is that gravity is not a force. However, I can still use classical mechanics to figure out the hang time of a football if I understand all of the variables involved. It is a practical tool, and so it is, therefore it's useful. Flat Earth, or geocentrism, or aether wind, they do not supply me with this tool. They do not supply me with the tools that I need in order to try to understand the descriptions of space and science and so forth to do that. So I reject that, and again, that follows into why I don't debate in this forum. That may be true from a logical or rhetorical standpoint, that you do not need to supply a positive argument in order to defeat another position using negative arguments. That may be a very valid rhetorical debate tactic. It is not a valid tactic in science. In science, you need to be able to, you can call into question aspects of a model or a theory, but you cannot say that model or theory needs to be disregarded entire unless you have something that can replace it. Second thing, or another thing, speaking of buying books, I decided to shell out and buy this. Flat Earth Science, Dr. Stephen Alonso. At some point I will get into this a little bit more in depth, but honestly, like I said, way oversubscribed in what I need to be doing. So this book contends, or Theoretical Frameworks and Limitations of Cosmology, a comprehensive analysis by the Journal of Geocentric Cosmology. It is purportedly a flat Earth science textbook. I will not comment on its, shall we say, its production quality, but what I can say is, at least for the descriptions of current science, like, for example, gravitational lensing, or what we currently believe the Big Bang Theory to state, this is very incomplete. This is incomplete to the point of almost uselessness. And it's strange because there's one particular one where he talks about gravitational lensing, and then there's a picture of a 24-hour sun in Antarctica, and it appears as if he is stating that gravitational lensing could in fact be the reason for why you could see a 24-hour sun in Antarctica on a flat Earth. He doesn't say anything about it. The picture has no caption. It's just there. But there were a couple of things that I wanted to point on to read, because I found them very fascinating. And they actually have nothing to do with flat Earth science. So, as a foreword, he says the most important aspect. Let me just read a couple of things from it. It is important to note, this is him, it is important to know that not everyone is on the same spiritual journey as you are. Many people are still in the process of waking up. They still believe in the narratives of 9/11, the moon landing, COVID, etc. As a practical system, it is not so much with analysis as with bringing into operation the creative and intuitive parts of man. I don't know what he means by not so much with analysis, but it seems to me as if he is stating that the creative and intuitive parts of man are more important when discussing the truth of things than quantitative analysis. Back to the book. One of the greatest obstacles to the success in the flat earth sciences is that the psycho-emotional system of its average student is hopelessly clogged with infantile and adolescent predilections which have not been recognized as such. The ego is thus compelled to extreme courses of action as through by compulsion. That is the last time that I'm going to mention that date. Robert, howdy. So, this is the part of the introduction forward that really is novel. As a final note, and by the way, that's the third to the last paragraph, not the last. As a final note, it is important to remember to not let this affect your personal life. Flat Earth research. The moment you take your first public Flat Earth post, make your first Flat Earth post, is the moment that your social life and public perception changes. We are in a world, but not, we are in this world, but not meant to be of it. The average person is what we call an NPC. They have no internal dialogue, no ability to critically think, and the only conclusions they can come to are the predetermined conclusions told to them by an authority figure. This accounts for at least 1/3 of the population. But this does not mean they are below us, and it also doesn't mean we have an obligation to teach them. You can still have friends, you can still socialize. You don't ever have to bring up the topic of flat Earth. So, apparently, according to Dr. Alonso, 1/3 of the people are NPCs that are incapable of independent thought. Yes, if you were thinking that the choice of NPC was related in any way to simulation theory, you would be correct. Dr. Alonso is a supporter of the idea that the universe is actually a computer simulation. Dr. Phil, that I will be talking about Witsit shortly. I just want to finish this off. But I don't know, because the problem I have with Austin is that, and he has been very honest about this, is that he will put forward theories of how the universe is that he doesn't believe in. He simply puts them forward in order to seed doubt as to the validity of current science. So, as you will see in or hear in his first episode, he does believe the Earth is flat. He does believe the Earth is motionless, and he does believe the Earth is the center of the universe. These are the three tenets that he will actually positively put forward at the beginning of this video. But last thing I will talk about before Middle Ground, episode 1, is this book has, so Unit 1, Foundations of Cosmology, Unit 2, Foundations of Math, Unit 3, Foundations of Astronomy. I would have thought that would have been under Cosmology, but anyway, or Cosmology would have been under that. Unit 4, Foundations of Physics. I would have put that higher, but whatever. Unit 5, Foundations of Logic. Yay. Unit 6, Foundations of Psychology. Again, this is a flat Earth textbook. I find it telling that he has a section in a flat Earth textbook about psychology. This is a bit long. I agree. I will freely admit, but it is. Where is it? Foundations of logic. But it's striking in just how dead on I agree. I agree with this really well, or to a very large extent, if you flip it. So he talks about cluster B personality traits, basically personality disorders like histrionics, narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't really, that part of it doesn't really matter. Section 6.4, countering cluster B strategies. Countering cluster B strategies when dealing with globe earthers and individuals who self-identify as globe believers and actively attack flat earthers require a thoughtful and strategic approach. Cluster B personality traits, which include antisocial, borderline, histrionic, and narcissistic tendencies, can manifest in behaviors that are manipulative, emotionally volatile, and attention-seeking. When these traits are present, individuals who aggressively defend the globe theory and attack flat earthers, it is important to navigate interactions carefully to avoid escalation and to effectively communicate the truth of the flat earth. So when I say flip it, basically every time I say flat, putting globe and vice versa. The one thing that I will not state is that he does seem to be heavily implying that if you believe the earth is a globe, you are in fact mentally ill. I have significant problems with that, and I certainly would not make that claim of that sweeping claim of flat earthers. I do not claim that I do not know, as I am not a psychologist. I am not going to diagnose anyone as being mentally ill, whereas flat earth belief is a symptom of said mental illness. One effective strategy is to maintain emotional detachment. Individuals with cluster B traits often thrive on emotional reactions and may attempt to provoke anger, frustration, or defensiveness. By staying calm and composed, flat earthers can avoid being drawn into emotionally charged arguments that distract from the actual discussion. Responding with patience and a clear, logical presentation of facts can help neutralize the emotional intensity that globe believers may try to interject into the conversation. 100% agree with this. This is dead on, in my opinion. But again, he is making the assertion that it is the globers that are being what's the word I'm looking for? Irrational. I'm not going to read all of this. Maybe I'll revisit this at this point, but I do want to get into the Witsit video. But here's another paragraph. Additionally, it is important to recognize and avoid falling into the trap of validating the globe believer's need for attention. People with histrionic or narcissistic traits, in particular, may seek to be the center of attention and may engage in provocative or outrageous behavior to achieve this. By refusing to give undue attention to these tactics and instead redirecting the conversation back to flat earth evidence, flat earthers can prevent the globe believer from hijacking the discussion. Yeah. So again, this is Dr. Stephen Alonso, a flat earther, giving advice on how to deal with globe earthers. Ooh, that's right. This stream officially brought to you by Monster. Please don't sue me. All right. All right.
Oh, in a world. All right. I think we're good. So, welcome to the first episode of Middle Ground. And obviously, pun title.
So, I just want to make sure that y'all can hear this, and the volume is good, video is good, and all that kind of good stuff. So this video is an hour long, and so I will try to, at the very least, get to the 30-minute mark, but I may have to do this in 2 sections. Who knows? Georg, according to Mallory, the shape of the Earth is a menthol problem. I used to smoke menthols. Those are pretty tasty, except for the fiberglass. Anyway, let's hear what Austin has to say.
Because if you're not new to this channel, then we cover many things regarding cosmology and the Earth. And over here we don't just blindly believe what we were told about the Earth. And we have 3 real big claims that the Earth is spinning and it's tilted, wobbling, and it's revolving around the sun as it shoots through space 500,000 miles per hour with the sun. And that entire solar system shoots through the galaxy at that 500,000, while the galaxy shoots 1.2 million through space. And there are actually more vectors than that, but so there's the idea that the Earth is moving all these different crazy, inconceivable speeds and vectors, but you can't feel it. And then there's the idea that the Earth is a sphere, it's curving.
Georg, you and Blue seem to be of the same mind. So here you again. This was what. To summarize what he just said was that he believes that the Earth is stationary. What frustrates me about this is that this is old ground. We've been covering this for years now. Granted, it seems as if Austin is attempting to speak to a new audience of flat earthers, but we've covered this. We don't feel acceleration. These are not inconceivable because obviously we have conceived of them. By very definition, they are not inconceivable. We have described them mathematically. We can predict these motions. And let's talk about these speeds very quickly. They will throw out, I've heard, we're traveling at 1,000 miles per hour. We don't feel speed. We feel acceleration. More specifically, we feel forces. For example, I have now started riding a motorcycle, and I can tell you that traveling at 70 kph in a car is a very much different experience than traveling on a bike. Because in the car, if it is not accelerating, I can close my eyes and I can imagine that I am standing still. Whereas if I'm on a motorbike, can't really do that because of, this thing called the atmosphere and wind and so forth. But if you look at the Earth is rotating once every 24 hours. If you want a concept of what that rotation looks like, look at your clock, or any clock, analog clock, and look at how fast the hour hand is moving. And then divide that by 2. That is, in fact, how fast the Earth is rotating on its axis. Doesn't seem all that fast to me, but apparently it is. And again, it frustrates me that we have to cover this ground over and over again.
At a specific rate, specific size, we know everywhere there is on the Earth. And then there is the claim that we are encapsulated in a vacuum, and we live in a pressurized system that's inside of a vacuum. And I called this middle ground because...
Oh, sorry. So the 3 tenets are, again, to summarize, is that the Earth is stationary, the Earth is flat, and that the Earth is in a pressurized container. Again, we've been here many, many times. The container, as it were, is gravity. And no matter how many times we tell them this, they seem to ignore the fact that we have told them this.
Having the conversation about whether or not the Earth is actually moving all those different vectors, and that would mean either the Earth is at rest or it's not, and if the Earth is at rest, it would be in the center of the universe perceivably, and the alternative is oftentimes referenced as the heliocentric model, actually a misnomer that's quite archaic. It's now called a solar barycentric model just on the local system. And of course, there's this massive
No one calls it that. I have never heard that term until now. Now, it may be true that folks like Dr. Bennett or Simon Shack might refer to it as that way, but astronomers do not refer to the solar system as a solar barycentric system on the local scale. That's not a thing that we talk about or describe, or that is not how we describe things. As I've mentioned in previous times, I do agree with him. Claiming that we believe in the heliocentric model is somewhat nonsensical because that ignores the entirety of basically the field of astronomy. The solar system is but one small aspect of the entirety of our understanding of the universe. And I am going to turn off my monitor because it's starting to annoy me. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Mic. Monitor off. Excellent. Now I'm not hearing myself in these headphones. So yeah, no one calls it that. Actually, what I've said in the past, just to finish off that thought, is that the current model of the solar system is called the Nice model, and it talks about not just how the solar system is today, but how it formed, how it is today, and how it eventually will end.
Accelerative, expanding universe. We look out our telescopes, and the edge of the visible universe is allegedly 46 billion light years away, etc. But for intents and purposes, heliocentric, the idea the Earth moves around the sun, and the sun is at rest in relation to the Earth, or the Earth is at rest and the sun moves around the Earth the way that we perceive it. And this is a middle ground conversation because, like I said, if you're not new, you know that I do not believe that the mainstream model is true at all. I suspend belief and apply empirical evidence and basic logic, and you will discover that the Earth is actually a stationary topographical plane. That being said, every time I try to have a conversation with someone about geocentrism, they immediately skip over it and try to strawman this idea of a quote-unquote flat Earth, a term almost assuredly created and more so popularized by someone like the CIA to characterize this conversation as stupid. And for example, if I say, do you have exclusive evidence the Earth moves around the sun? Someone will say, you can't even prove eclipses on a flat Earth. It's like totally irrelevant. And
so I will be honest, I've only watched the first part of this. We're getting into parts where I have not kept going. This claim that somehow this discussion has been, that flat Earth was a term come up by the CIA. Please. I've been at this for, I've been around this conversation for what, 5-6 years, since 2018. For the vast majority of that, flat earthers, or people who believe that the Earth is not a sphere, who believe the Earth is flat, say it, believe them, or call themselves flat earthers, or really have not had any problems that I've foreseen of being called a flat earther. But there does seem to be this new sort of movement started by Bev and his cohorts of this. It's not flat because of hills and mountains and so forth. It's just planar. no one claims that you are claiming that, or no one is saying that flat Earth is perfectly flat. Of course, we all know that there are mountains, that there are topographical differences. What we are talking about is the general shape of the Earth. If you believe it to be topographical differences on a plane, then you are a flat earther. I don't know how you can get around that fact. Now, I will agree that this idea that the flat Earth is a pizza flying through space, that is not a common conception. Although I think Dell believes that now. But among all the other flat earthers I've talked to, generally speaking, they do not believe that this is a space pizza. Just that the Earth is a flat plane with mountains, valleys, and so forth. So this this idea of it not being a flat Earth, and that globers or whatever are trying to discredit them by somehow strawmanning them in or misrepresenting their position, I don't buy it. I don't buy it at all, and I think it's an attempt at rewriting history.
So let's just meet in the middle, have a discussion. That's the idea of the
I agree.
new series.
Let's
and of
have a
course,
discussion.
you got mini puns in there, the ground, talking about what's happening on the Earth. So you get it. And of course, if the Earth's not moving, it would put us in the middle of the universe. So, welcome to the show.
So, I agree. Let's have a conversation. But let's have a conversation that does not involve name calling, does not involve assertions of someone's character or what you believe that they are trying to accomplish. Let's just have a conversation. Now, I may very well be guilty in the past with my live streams of doing just that, of mocking or being sarcastic or not taking science skeptics seriously, and I own that, and it's something that I am going to try to improve in terms of my behavior, because that is not how I want to hold myself in these conversations. I simply want to address any kind of misinformation that may be out there, or come to some kind of meeting of the mind so that I can understand your position, so that potentially we can move forward. So yes, fully agree that we want to, with having that discussion. Now, that statement you just kind of threw out there, that and just for whatever reason, that if the Earth is stationary, that it must be the center of the universe. There's no, those two things don't follow. If the Earth is in fact stationary, then there is no presumption that it is in fact the center of the universe. Although, now that I'm thinking about this, if you say that the Earth is stationary and everything is revolving around it, then it is the center of the universe. Maybe, all right, and I will back off that statement. Howdy, Nico.
I encourage people to send this to people that are maybe new to the subject. Hopefully,
I encourage people to send this to people who are new to the subject.
The intro didn't trigger too much cognitus, because it's famously said it's the mark of...
The intro, which I did not play, is a musical number that has way too much auto-tune, in my opinion, and is something on the order of modern science is wrong and whatever. You can go to his channel and you can listen to it for yourself. I don't want to misrepresent in any way, but I just want to give you context of what he's talking about.
An intelligent mind to be able to entertain alternative ideas without believing in them. And of course, dismissal prior to investigation is the height of ignorance. So there's the intro. So if you're not new to this channel, I've covered geocentrism quite a bit. I have a stream called Geocentrism. It's about 3.5 hours long, and I go through all kinds of mainstream astronomers and astrophysicists quotes discussing the topic of geocentrism.
If you are a fan of my channel, then you will know the next thing on my list of things that I don't give two fucks about are quotes. Again, this is in relation to why I don't debate in this forum, because to me, quotations have no significance scientifically. This is not a cult of personality, despite the fact it seems to me people on the flat earth want it to be. They speak about Newtonian physics. They speak about Einsteinian physics. I much prefer classical mechanics and general relativity. Because while Newton was the founder of classical mechanics, while Einstein was the founder of relativity, these subjects have been explored for centuries in terms of classical mechanics, and the last century in terms of relativity. It is not just simply one man, and one man's opinion matters not in a field that is evidence driven. One of my favorite things to talk about in this context is Einstein. God doesn't play dice. Einstein would not accept quantum mechanics because he was a determinist. From a scientific standpoint, that is a no-no. He is allowing his worldview, his belief in how the world should be, to color his judgment as to the validity of a scientific theory. As scientists, we need to be above that. So,
centrism, the viability or lack thereof. And
so
this intro to the new series is going to be similar. It's going to be very simple, very basic, very intro level. We are going to really get into this conversation, a conversation that is entirely suppressed. It's basically labeled as dissident to even entertain it. And when you really peel back the layers and you understand what it is that this conversation actually is, the idea that it's mocked and ridiculed and labeled as dissident or insane is wildly ironic and very rich. And truth is not for everyone. So if you cannot even truly investigate this conversation without being bogged down by preconceived notions, the necessity to conform to consensus, you're going to have a rough time.
So here, the necessity to conform, consensus, and all that, and I suppose there's a reason for stating all that, but again, if this is a scientific discussion, then we are talking about evidence. We're not talking about consensus. We have a consensus in science because the evidence is convincing enough that people understand that that is the best description that we have. It isn't that the consensus starts first and then dictates the science. It's that the science dictates the consensus. So, again, he's using language like throwing out that insanity and throwing out certain things like that nature. I personally, I'm getting tired of those sorts of accusations being thrown around on either side of this debate, or this discussion, I should say. So, yeah.
With all that being said, we're going to get right
Howdy,
into it.
Clive.
And welcome to everyone. We're on Rockfin, Rumble, X, and YouTube. Want to support the stream? Ko-fi.com/
Just a minor aside, I am never going to be on X because X has porn, and I do not wish to be like a certain politician that has discussions about random things on a porn site. So yeah, fuck X.
Witsit, if you want to donate live, it's pinned in the chat. And we're going to jump right into presentation. So here we have, again, the first episode.
The blazer and the
shirt. It is titled The Copernican Principle.
You know.
So if you're not familiar with it, we're going to break down what it is.
Style recognizes style.
I'm going to try not to overwhelm you because I am pretty familiar with this conversation and it goes deep And I don't want to overwhelm someone that's new to the subject. If you stick around and you come and watch the show every week, we'll try to keep it where it's manageable. It's not super long.
I don't know how I feel about this. If someone were to tell me that that I'm going to keep it simple and whatever, I feel as if I'm almost being insulted. Um, Give it to me however you want to give it to me. It is up to me to try to follow along and understand it. So you don't need. It seems like he wants to dumb it down, or keep it simple so that people can follow. I understand if you're new to something, you want to have a simple approach to it, but why preface this? Like, why put this in here? I don't think it's necessary.
And if you actually continue to keep up with it, you will be equipped to hear some of the more advanced, in the weeds conversations, if you will. This will blow your mind if you are new to this subject. It will absolutely blow your mind that you were not told about this, that it's suppressed, and that it's grossly misrepresented by the mainstream at the least. At the least, it has been tactically omitted and misrepresented. And for that reason alone, that should interest you, and you should feel the need to inform yourself instead of allowing other people to make up your mind for you about a subject you do not even understand. Okay.
So he's saying that you shouldn't listen to other people, but you should listen to him. Again, why? Essentially, this sounds to me like a sales pitch. I mean, if we're going to have a conversation, then just have the conversation. Claiming that the other side is being nefarious and lying or omission or what have you, and that you shouldn't believe them, but you should only believe me, that is not in good faith. We can't have a discussion if at the outset you are accusing the other side of being deceitful.
So let's get into what the Copernican principle is. I've discovered that the vast majority of the public doesn't even know what that is. But once you explain it,
Fair.
They believe it. So let's get right into it. Copernican principle, in its classical form, is the principle that the Earth does not rest in a privileged or special physical position in the universe. Okay. So this is the idea the Earth doesn't occupy a special or unique position in the universe, that we're not a privileged or special observer. Basically, it's the idea that the Earth is this tiny speck of dust and this tucked away in this insignificant corner of this ever-expanding universe of emptiness with a size and magnitude that's inconceivable to the carnal mind. Basically, you're just insignificant.
Basically, you're just insignificant. That's what he just said. Carnal mind? Does that mean something other than what I think it means? Okay. All right, so let's break that down. And again, I have gone off on many times about this. The supposition that the Copernican principle states that the Earth is an insignificant speck of dust in the outskirts or boondocks of the Milky Way galaxy, which is but one of billions of galaxies in the universe, therefore making us not relevant in any way whatsoever, is a you problem. That is not what the Copernican principle states. It's right there, right on that slide. The Copernican principle, all it states is that the Earth does not rest in a privileged or special physical position in the universe. It has nothing to say about the significance of the Earth. Significance would imply some kind of qualitative measure, some kind of subjective value judgment as to whether or not we are worthy or whether or not we are good, or however you want to describe that. And I rail completely against this. I hold to the Copernican principle. Actually, I hold more generally to the cosmological principle that states that there is no privileged or special physical position in the universe, Earth or otherwise. So I rail against this. I hold to this principle, but I rail against this interpretation that means that humanity is insignificant. I'm sorry, but I believe the exact opposite. If we are the only if we are the only speck of humanity in the entirety of the universe, and we are only on the surface of this small mote of dust, if you will, that makes us wildly significant. That makes us unique. And I don't know about you, but my society holds that when something is unique, something has a lot of significance. Diamonds are expensive not just because they're pretty, but because they are rare. So this idea that we are in fact nothing, I reject that entirely. I also reject the notion that science is claiming that, or is trying to tell people that, through the Copernican principle. So again, while I agree with the Copernican principle, and actually I'm going to adjust that a little bit. The Copernican principle, truly in its classical form, is the principle that the Earth does not rest in a privileged or special physical position in the solar system. Depends on what you mean by classical. He's going to get into Copernicus in a second. Because if we go to Aber Curtis, around the turn of the 20th century, Aber Curtis did believe that the Earth held a special position in the center of the galaxy. So, the Copernican principle, in the way it is understood now, is that the Earth does not hold a special, is that it does not hold a privileged, or excuse me, is that the Earth does not hold a privileged position in the solar system. But anyway, that starts getting to semantics.
That's the idea.
Howdy,
the reason that it's called.
All right, I'm gonna. I've heard this before, and not to call people out or anything like that, but he is employed. He makes money off this. This is his job. I don't know what else the man's got going on, what other side hustles he's got going on, but he makes money off this. To say that he's unemployed is disingenuous, because there are plenty of YouTubers out there whose careers are in YouTube. So the man has a job. Let's be honest about this.
The Copernican principle is because once you accept the idea of the Copernicus model, which is the guy.
Yogsful, another defeated Glober that has become obsessed with Witsit. I love it. I will admit, the videos that I do on Witsit, they get more views. I'll own it. But the other thing about Witsit is that he puts out content like this, which is hour-long information. Not debates, nothing like that. Hour-long pieces of information, which is what I want to address. I want to address any kind of misinformation that is out there. So, yes, if there is another content creator out there that you think that I should address, that has videos, by all means, send them my way. One of the people that I want to that has been on my list forever is Dr. Robitaille. He believes that the sun is in fact not a ball of gas, but actually condensed matter. But again, so to say that I'm obsessed with Witsit, no, he's low-hanging fruit. To be honest with you, he's easy access that I can do these streams.
Nicholas Copernicus presented the idea that the Earth is in fact revolving around the sun. That has implications. Certainly in modern times, it would make the Earth quite insignificant in the grand scheme of things. And so the Copernican principle was retroactively attributed to Copernicus based on the implications of his model combined with modern astronomical observations. So it's the idea the Earth doesn't occupy a special or unique position. You can probably realize the philosophical importance and implications of that idea. If that were true, that is drastically different than the alternative, which is that the Earth occupies a special and unique position. So this.
Okay. So again, when you talk about the position of the Earth, when you talk about the composition or the how the universe is built, you're talking about science. I do not know why you're bringing philosophy into this. Again, you problem. Science has nothing to say about philosophy. If you want to if you want to make philosophical assertions about what science tells us, by all means do so. But do not attribute it to science. Those are your assertions or your interpretation of scientists' belief systems. And yes, Austin has precedent for this. Folks like Richard Dawkins, folks like Lawrence Krauss, folks like Neil deGrasse Tyson. All of these people have said similar. One of my heroes, Carl Sagan, has also made claims about whether or not that the Earth is insignificant based on scientific principles. But again, you are more than welcome to do that. You are more than welcome to have these philosophical assertions, but they are not science, and they are not what science is telling people. Science deals with observable evidence, not philosophical assertions. All right, Leroy.
This is worthy of investigation on its face if you understand the philosophy underneath it. Let's continue.
Science is not philosophy.
So this is a quote from Copernicus, and it is, "Finally we shall place the sun himself at the center of the universe." Okay,
Correct.
now you may notice he personifies the sun, and that's pretty weird. The reason I started...
Nope. Anthropomorphizing material objects, that has been done forever. It is a poetic device. Read Homer if you want great examples of this.
Started it off with this quote is, we're basically told that the idea that the Earth revolves around the sun, and there's a solar system with different planets, and we know exactly how it works. We know exactly how big every planet is and how far away it is and how big the universe is and how small the solar system is within that universe, is presented.
I take umbrage with exactly. Science does not say where exactly we are. It does not say where exactly or what the size of the Earth is exactly. Everything that science states has error bars. Now, is it presented publicly as not having error bars? Sure, yes, because of reasons, and that is a conversation that I would love to have. I have also been an outspoken critic of the current state of science communication. That it is, in fact, extremely flawed and has given rise to the perpetuation of the idea of flat Earth. But to say that we claim to know anything exactly is incorrect.
To us as definitive science. In fact, as children, we're told that this is just definitive fact, unquestionable fact. We're not told an alternative because we know it's...
No. I have never been told that these are unquestionable facts. I have been taught that this is our current understanding, and it could be inferred from the lectures and from the material that these are quote unquote facts. But once you get into it, once you understand, this is again our best understanding. This is the framework that we currently have in order to explore the universe. We are not saying it is absolute truth. No one is saying that this cannot be questioned, because if that were the case, relativity would never have happened, because classical mechanics would have been the truth. So therefore, if scientists believed that classical mechanics was unquestionable, then how did relativity become a thing? So again, incorrect.
Such a definitive fact. And nothing could be further from the truth. It is not science.
Correct.
In its very origin, because out of one side of people's mouths, they will say, we've known this for hundreds of years. Science has proven, and they had to battle the church and religion to prove.
Anyone who says that science proves anything is either lying or selling you something. Science does not prove anything. And I've said this on multiple occasions, and I will continue, apparently, to say this on multiple occasions. Science, all science can do is provide the best explanation for the physical description of the universe, or any phenomenon within said universe, given the precision of our instruments. We cannot prove any of this. We can simply give you the best description based on the evidence that we have determined either observationally or experimentally. So if a glober tells you that we have proven that the Earth is going around the sun for centuries, then they are either lying or selling you something. But it is accurate to say that the evidence overwhelmingly states or shows that the Earth is going around the sun, and basically has been shown that the basis of that evidence does start in the realm of, or in the age of Copernicus.
Prove that the Earth was moving around the sun. There's a heliocentric model. Hundreds and hundreds of years ago, we've known that for so long. No, actually, at that time,
I wasn't going to bring election stuff into this because this is supposed to be a departure from election, but I can't ignore this. Fucking Ted Cruz won. God damn it. All right. Anyway, I'm going to take this off because I don't want to spoil the mood. Anyway, where were we?
What people proposed as the anomalies was that the sun was the center of the entire universe and the Earth moved around it. Now, what's interesting is he personifies it here. I decided not to make this stream specifically about Copernicus and everything involving him.
Again,
I may sprinkle some more very revealing quotes about him in the future in other episodes, but long story short, he was an occultist. He deified the sun. He believed that it was the symbolic personification of enlightenment. It was the path to apotheosis. He consistently personified it. He said that it was singing a heavenly song, and all other bodies, celestial bodies, were paying homage and basically worshiping the deity that is the sun. And that is why he referred to it as a personified entity. He's very... So,
I find this to be extremely questionable, considering that the man was a devout Catholic. So the idea that he would venerate the sun, C-U-N, rather than C-O-N, I find to be doubtful. The other issue is that if he truly was deifying the sun, he would have capitalized himself rather than not. And yes, that is important. Despite a conversation that I had with a flat earther recently. Now, even if all of that is true, even if he was a die-hard sun worshiper, that makes no difference at all to his model. That makes no difference, or it has no significance to the applicability of his model and the predictions that it makes, or the justification, or rather the, not the justification, but rather whether or not the sun is in fact the center of the universe. And I'm going to, again, maybe I am at the risk of misrepresenting Austin. He keeps saying they said it's at the center of the universe. Yes, they did, because at the time, the evidence suggested that the universe was fairly small. They did not have any evidence from which to extrapolate a large universe. And so therefore, they refer to everything they know to be true as the universe. And at that point, all they really had any sort of evidence for, quantifiable evidence, was the solar system. We see this again in the turn of the century, in that Harlow Shapley believed that the universe was actually rather small. He believed that the Milky Way galaxy was the entirety of the universe. I personally think it was because he was extremely full of himself, but that's, this is not, this is a continuing, our understanding, when our understanding of the universe, when our understanding of the universe grows, or rather the observations grow, when our technology progresses, when we are able to probe different regions of space, when we are able to probe different regions of, just basically existence, then the universe gets bigger, and it is acknowledged as such.
Clear about this. In fact, he says at another point in time that based on the ancient conceptions where they deify the sun, I felt that I was given permission to understand my intuitive understanding that the sun is in fact a deity. I'm slightly paraphrasing. So that is interesting. Again, just to lay out this general premise here, is it did not start as science. It started as something much.
Whether or not it started as science or not, again, holds no relevance to the model itself and what it was able to accomplish. And one of the things that I have been told from a scientific historian here is that one of the reasons that motivated Copernicus to come up with his put the sun at the center of the solar system was, or at least visit this problem, was the idea of Ptolemaic epicycles. Because in the Ptolemaic model, or at least in the Aristotelian model, the planets revolved on solid spheres, the idea that you had epicycles seemed to make no sense, because that would mean solid spheres were moving within solid spheres. So one of his motivations was, in fact, to try to reconcile, or to figure out that problem, or to reconcile that problem. But again, it holds no relevance to the model itself and what it states.
It's different. And another major point of this quote here is that he said the sun was in the center of the universe. And if you know anything about modern cosmology or modern cosmological claims, the sun is nowhere close to the center of the universe. And that's a very primitive and archaic.
That is because Copernicus lived hundreds of years ago and did not have access to the information that we have access now. How is this relevant?
Idea, and it's not even possibly viable based on astronomical observations. Now, he proposed this as the alternative that the Earth is in the center of the universe. Now, what you will discover in this series is that the Earth being in the center of the universe actually is still, to this day, in 2024, viable. And not only viable, it's actually more viable and arguably the only possible explanation.
To quote a theologian on YouTube that I like, let's see it. I can't wait to see this argument. I've heard this argument before, and I'm going to have to say that I strongly disagree with that assertion.
So if we were to apply simple logic here, at the time, he proposed the idea the sun was in the center of the universe, everything moves around it. That has been excluded as possible. Yet the actual understanding that he proposed that in opposition to is still significantly more viable than what he proposed. Think about already how...
So again, simply because Copernicus put the sun at the center of the universe has nothing to do with this. Because Copernicus did not have the information that we have now. Copernicus was wrong. The Copernican model, as a model of the universe itself, is wrong. It is simply a description of the solar system, or was a description, or I guess is a description of the solar system, even though it is flawed. And modern science knows this, that we profess this. So this idea, or this notion that he is putting forward Copernicus as being representative of current scientific understanding is inaccurate.
How misrepresented the story is in the mainstream and in consensus and via the indoctrination referred to as education. Should be very interesting.
Education is indoctrination. I love how that was just thrown out there willy-nilly. Again, if you want to have a conversation, statements like that don't help. Because essentially, while a flat earther may not like being called insane, I certainly don't like being called indoctrinated. I sure as shit don't like the implication that as an educator, I am indoctrinating people. So can we not include that in our discussions?
Next, Copernicus
Howdy,
again.
nerd.
Near the sun is the center of the universe. Moreover, since the sun remains stationary, whatever appears as a motion of the sun is really due rather to the motion of the earth. Okay, so I added this for obvious reasons. You guys give me feedback on the quality if something's not legit. So he says here, the basic premise, and I think this is important for you to understand as you go into this.
Minor note. I believe he is asserting this quotation to Copernicus. If he is, note that the very beginning of it says near the sun is the center of the universe, which seems to be in direct contrast with the previous quote he just had, where Copernicus supposedly said that the sun was the specific center of the universe?
Let's say, examination into this investigation. This is the base premise. Copernicus said he believed
I
that
really hope
the
he's
sun
actually read that book.
was some type of celestial deity, everything moved around it. And based on that assumption, that means the sun remains stationary.
I do not believe in the motions of the heavenly bodies. In that work where he describes his model, Copernicus references the sun as a deity. He just simply refers to it as a sun. If I am wrong, I would be happy to be shown that. If Austin or anyone else can show me within the work, I believe it is called the motions of the heavenly bodies, at least in Latin, where he states in that text that the sun is a deity, I would love to see it. Because if not, then again, claiming that the sun is a deity within a scientific framework is inaccurate.
In the center of the universe, and everything moves around the sun, basically praising it. And therefore, anytime that we see the sun moving, it's actually an illusion. Sun is stationary. It is not moving. It just appears that way because we are moving. So that's the base premise here. And as we get further on into the series and we investigate the alleged evidences of heliocentrism, they're almost all this very thing. If I say, can you provide me exclusive evidence the Earth moves around the sun? Someone will say seasons. I'm saying, what do you mean by seasons? How does that prove the Earth moves around the sun? Well,
I would not say, if someone were to say, ask me for evidence that the Earth moves, I would not say seasons. That would not be on my my list of, or that would not be at the top of my list. I suppose you could say that seasons does imply that, because essentially you have an axial tilt that is pointed towards the Earth. But you could come up with this idea that the Earth is in fact stationary, and it is in fact the Earth that tilts from one side to the next as the sun goes around, or come up with some other model. I would not consider seasons as being a great reason or a great proof or piece of evidence for the motion of the Earth.
We see the sun, it moves in the sky throughout the year to give us seasons. Sometimes it's closer, sometimes it's further away. So your evidence that the Earth...
No, that is that if he is saying that the cause of seasons is the distance of the sun, that is incorrect. distance does matter, does play a factor within the extremums of seasons. The folks in the southern hemisphere, sadly, have more extreme seasons than us folks in the northern hemisphere. But the primary cause of the seasons is not distance. It is the axial tilt of the Earth. It is whether or not it is based on two factors. One, how concentrated are the solar rays on the Earth? So how effective does the sun heat the Earth's surface? And two, how long does the sun stay in the sky? Because of the axial tilt in the summer, the rays are more direct. In the northern, or the rays are more direct, and the sun spends more time heating the Earth than it does in the winter.
Earth moves around the sun is that we see the sun moving, but according to you, it's actually stationary, completely still, and not moving. If you don't see how that's fundamentally illogical and frankly insane to believe that it's any type of exclusive.
How is this illogical or insane? How is stating that the sun is immobile any more illogical or insane than stating that the Earth is stationary and immobile? Or whatever, you get what I'm saying. How is one scenario insane, but the other is not?
Evidence. I encourage you to think about what we just talked about. All right. That's why I put that quote in there. Just a couple from Copernicus.
There are other pieces of evidence, better pieces of evidence.
In 1543, I believe it is, the revolution of celestial spheres, and it was in Latin. And we'll cover him more in depth. But I really want to drive home what the Copernican principle is, how it applies in modern times. Because now someone may kind of, although initially you're told to repeat the propaganda that we've known the Earth moves around the sun for hundreds of years. How stupid. No.
Propaganda? Again, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Triggered language? Very, what's the word? Damn it. Colored? Biased? There's a word for it, and I can't think of it. I'm going to say colored language. You are stating that the current education is propaganda without evidence. Again, this is not an argument coming, or a discussion rather, coming in good faith. You are basically dismissing or denigrating our side. You are doing exactly what you claim the Globers do to you, is be dismissive and be derogatory to your position. So, Goose, Gander?
Actually, that idea was so primitive, counterintuitive, antithetical to evidence, inadmissible logically, and stupid that it is laughably not possible at this point. So then they will move the goalpost and they will say something to the effect of, well, nowadays we have more evidence and we know that the Earth moves around the sun. Okay, then the very narrative you were using to...
So how is it moving the goalposts by saying that we have more evidence? Where was the goalpost originally? Was the goalpost at seasons? Because as I've just said, seasons are actually not a great piece of evidence for the fact that the Earth, for the fact that the Earth moves, because it's shorthand. Please understand that when I say fact, it's just a natural tone of speech. My position, again, has always been that this is the best explanation that we have. So, but anyway, where is the change in the goalposts?
Mock the people not blindly believing in it must be retired. You're not going to keep saying it, right? You're not going to keep on making this faulty, false claim that you proved it hundreds and hundreds of years ago, because the model isn't even what it used to be. It's nowhere close. They said the sun was in the center of the universe, and that's not even remotely close to what is claimed now. If the Earth is moving, the sun cannot be in the center of the universe. So hopefully...
So again, I don't know who he's talking to, But anyone who claims that science had proven that the Earth was the center of the universe as fact, and now that that isn't the case. As I described before, they were under the assumption that Copernicus was under the assumption that when he said the center of the universe of his understanding. So, how is this moving the goalposts? Unless you're basically saying, and I have heard this from others, or there seems to be this expectation that science can only be correct if it gets it right the first time. That science cannot change over time, which is diametrically opposed to this notion that you're putting forward, that current science states that science is unquestioned. Which is it? Is it unquestioned, or do claims about quotes from scientists over the centuries have changed in their understanding of what the universe is? Sorry, I just completely lost that train of thought. So which is it? Is it unquestioning, or is it that because of new data, we have been able to expand our understanding, and these quotations, these old quotations, are in fact archaic?
You understand what I'm laying out here. I'm trying to keep it very simple. And you're intellectually honest enough to understand you're going to see this reoccurring theme that the propaganda...
Again, why bring in intellectually honest? Why make that statement? Again, this is not an argument in good faith.
narratives that you're told to repeat, and you will hear everyone repeat, and they'll do so with illusory confidence, and they'll mock and they'll ridicule, are actually very ignorant, easily disproven propaganda talking points. And that should make you wonder if what you're saying is true. Why would you have to create and craft such scripts, right? All right.
The fact that he is accusing Globers of having scripts is laughable, considering considering the narratives that have been put out on the flat Earth side. That is just very laughable to me. Mega ego, mega condensation, snake oil salesman speak. Witsit will not give those up, even if he ditches flat Earth and changes to geocentric globe Earth. I'm gonna pause here for a second, and I'm probably going to do exactly what I said that people shouldn't do, and I'm going to hypothesize on Witsit's motivations. I think that and this goes back to him stating that flat Earth is a CIA psyop or whatever the fuck it was. In that he is intelligent enough to realize that flat Earth, that approaching people with people outside this sphere with the notion that the Earth is flat, like Alex Jones, for example, he is going to laugh at it. He is going to dismiss it as being ridiculous. So if you are attempting to put forward your position, you want to color it in a way that is easier to accept. And so the notion that the Earth is at the center of the universe is a far easier notion to accept than the Earth is flat. And once you get them to the point where they accept that the Earth is in fact the center of the universe, you can then start to talk about the Earth being flat, because that no longer seems as out there, because all of you have already basically negated all of the current modern science. So when you say that he ditches flat Earth, he might ditch it in terms of what he talks about, but I don't think he's ditching it in terms of his core belief system. So at least that is my opinion. Yeah.
Here we have a bit of a bombshell for you because I know some people are familiar with this conversation. So I wanted to drop a little gem that I recently discovered in there. We will have a lot of these in this new series. But if you're not familiar with kind of the sequence of events, you have Ptolemy, a geocentric model. And then you fast forward and you get Copernicus, 1543. Fast forward a little more, you get Tycho Brahe's model, a slightly revised geocentric model. You fast forward a little bit more, you get Kepler's laws. Okay, and just to come back over here, make sure you get it. Kepler's laws is the idea, or more so, it is the mapping of the planets. It's a geometric mapping of the planets. Geometry, shapes, measurements of shapes. So basically, we made calculations based on the observed motions of the quote-unquote planets in the sky. We mapped them out. They have a cycle. They move in relation to the Earth. We map them out from the Earth's position. And then we realize that they have a relationship. There's a somewhat consistent ratio.
That's inaccurate. Kepler did not measure the position of Mars, specifically his war on Mars, from the position of the Earth. He quite deliberately measured the position of Mars relative to the sun. And he used observations of Martian longitudes and solar longitudes in order to do that. So the idea that Kepler somehow derived his three laws of motion from a geocentric point of view is inaccurate. Also, to be more precise in language, what Kepler did was that he took the observations of Tycho and he fit mathematical laws to them. The primary of which is that orbits follow the geometric shape of an ellipse, where a circle is a special case of said ellipse.
So, in relationship based on how these planets move in relation to the Earth, where we're observing it, and in relation to the sun. And so they take the periodicity and the radii of these different motions, and you throw it in with the cycles, and then you get what's called Kepler's laws. And this is
Kepler did not measure radii, to be clear. Kepler's laws, as they were as they were written, were ratios. Kepler could not tell you absolutely what the distance of Venus was to the Earth, or excuse me, what Venus was to the Sun. All he could say was that the ratio of the Venusian orbit to the Earth orbit is 70%. That's all he could say. So he did not, in fact, measure radii or distances.
kinematic. So it has nothing to do with if it's truly viable in terms of like quote unquote gravity or a force that's causing it to move. It has nothing to do with any of that. It's literally just, to put it very crudely, it's like a caveman going out there and writing down what he sees in the sky and then handing it off to his children. And over the course of time, they had it mapped out pretty well. They know where the planets are going to be. And then
that is, in fact, not accurate in any way whatsoever. Kepler used data from exclusively one dude, and that dude being Tycho Brahe. Kepler was intimately aware of the quality of that data, including the error associated with that data. Oh shit, I just lost it. Where was it? Yeah, let me back that up, because I don't know why, but I just completely lost what I was going to go with that.
we made calculations based on the observed motions of the quote-unquote planets in the sky. We mapped them out. They have a cycle. They move in relation to the Earth. We map them out from the Earth's position. And then we realize that they have a relationship. There's a somewhat consistent ratio and relationship based on how these...
Oh, yeah. I remember what it is now. So, again, he only did it with really one planet. That was Mars. Mars was the cornerstone of the entirety of Kepler's laws. So this notion that we had this, from the Stone Age, this database of observations that Kepler was using is just incorrect. He was using observations from one dude, Tycho. And I just learned this recently. because I was also of the same opinion. I believe that Kepler approached this simply from an empirical point of view, that he was simply fitting mathematical relationships to the positions in order to make future predictions. That is, in fact, not the case. And Austin, you may want to look into this further, I suppose, because Kepler did, in fact, put forward a physical mechanism for why the planets moved. And that was his actual motivation for going to the ellipse. Because he had shown, and I'll get more into this in a second because it's related to this controversy, is that he had already shown that circles and ovals could not fit the data, or did not fit the data sufficiently well. And so he was physically motivated to explore ellipses because he believed that there was a central force that was, get it, magnetic. He did not believe it, he did not understand gravity, but he believed that there was a magnetic pull between Mars and the Sun which caused it to go in the shape of an ellipse. Howdy, Horizons. Howdy, Cygnus. So I found that to be quite. So the idea that Kepler did not assert any sort of physical mechanism, that this is pure kinematics, is inaccurate. He did posit a physical mechanism for why planets go around in ellipses.
Planets move in relation to the Earth, where we're observing it, and in relation to the Sun. And so they take the periodicity and the radii of these different motions, and you throw it in with the cycles, and then you get what's called Kepler's laws. And this is kinematic, so it has nothing to do with if it's truly viable in terms of like quote unquote gravity or a force that's causing it to move. It has nothing to do with any of that. It's literally just, to put it very crudely, it's like a caveman going out there and writing down what he sees in the sky and then handing it off to his children. And over the course of time, they had it mapped out pretty well. They know where the planets are going to be. And then they just applied an equation to understand where these planets would be. Here's what they won't tell you, though.
Not what
happened. This is
happened.
very interesting. So this is William Donahue, a well-respected astronomer. Quote, "We might at this point condemn Kepler of fraud and bring the case to a close, but this would be to ignore what is perhaps the most fascinating question. Why did he do it?" He later goes on to say, "How could Kepler, with his high regard for the truth, perpetrate such a patent fraud?" And that's Kepler's Fabricated Figures, Covering Up the Mess, and the New Astronomy by, again, Dr. William Donahue, Journal for the History of Astronomy, 1988. Now, this is what happened. You have Kepler, again, many hundreds of years ago. And many people will tell you that Kepler's laws prove heliocentricity, which is just grossly inept and ignorant and untrue. But what's
don't know
wild,
why I need to qualify.
You're going to see this happen over and over and over. I put a few examples in this first show.
Again, doesn't prove.
You get all the way up into the 80s, and you have to have a professor of astronomy look through Kepler's raw data and his writings. He actually translated Kepler's writings from Latin. So that was that's why he won awards. He was well revered for his work. What he discovered was that his writings and claims are so patently fraudulent, all you have to do is compare the calculations to the chart of data, observational data in a previous chapter, and that it's just not even close. He claims computational success based on inputs that actually aren't in the data.
Okay, so I plan on doing a little bit more of a deep dive on this, but let's set this up. Dr. Donahue is not an astronomer. He is a astronomy historian, and it is true that Dr. Donahue was the first person to, and I don't know why it took until the 1980s to do this, but he was the first to translate New Astronomy from Latin into English so that it was more accessible. However, that should be an indication of something. And that indication is that astronomy didn't need it to be translated. Once we understood what Kepler's laws were, we no longer needed to go back to the original source in order to explore it further. But that is somewhat beside the point. So Dr. Donahue was the first to translate Kepler's New Astronomy into English in 1988. And what he noticed was that in chapter 53, what Kepler was talking about was he was putting down Sun, Mars distances. And in that chapter, what his point was that given these distances, a circular orbit had to be precluded. An ovular orbit had to be precluded. And he put these data on, and he put this data up as a demonstration for it. This is where the fraud comes in. And there is something to this. I will say this right now. This is not. Again. All right. So let me put this a little bit more clearer. Is this fraud outright? The understanding now is not really. This is, and it should be noted that Donahue, Donahue mistranslated there are 150 places where Donahue mistranslated the work. It wasn't an interpretation of translation or anything of that nature. He simply got it wrong. One of the most telling to me is that he translated the Latin word for remove to take up. That is just simply wrong. He made errors, so his translation is not perfect to begin with. Second thing is, it has been suggested that Donahue did not understand Kepler's methodology. Now, I will try to make this short. In chapter 53, Kepler put forward a method via which he arrived at those distances. Donahue then used that methodology using modern equipment, calculators essentially, and discovered that the data doesn't match. The values that Kepler quoted in New Astronomy and the values that you would get if you actually did Kepler's method were off. There are two very important things to recognize, however. They're not off by much. And again, this is where error is important. And this is something that needs to be part of this conversation, these conversations, is the concept of error. Kepler was intimately aware of how well or how much he could trust Tycho's observations. Basically, Tycho's observations were good to 50 to 100 parts in 100,000. The most that the two values that Kepler and Donahue arrived at is 60. The errors, or the differences between Donahue's method numbers and Kepler's printed numbers is statistically indistinguishable. What that basically means is that they're the same within the precision of the measurements. 2, Kepler is very clear throughout New Astronomy that he uses approximations because they're easier. He has numerously in New Astronomy asked the geometers to come up with a more elegant way for him to arrive at the answers that he needs in order to fully describe these orbits. And so he cuts corners. He admits to this. And so what is probably going on here is that Kepler wrote chapter 53. He used his methodology that he describes to determine these distances, so that he could, in so doing, he eliminated circular and ovular orbits. Now, did he do those calculations precisely as listed? Probably not, because those calculations, particularly in an age where you had to look up trigonometric functions in tables, you did not have calculators, this was extremely difficult. And so he probably made certain approximations. For example, he probably used, or it has been hypothesized, that for Donohue's method, he used spherical trig in order to determine the distances between the Earth, or the Mars and the Sun, whereas Kepler may have just simply used straightforward Euclidean trigonometry. But given the size of the angles, it's a fair approximation. So again, that would explain the discrepancies, which again must be stated are statistically indistinguishable. Donohue's values, using the methodology that Kepler describes, are statistically indistinguishable from Kepler's printed values. Now, where does this fraud come in? It is very likely that when Kepler, in chapter 57, puts forward this idea of orbits and ellipse based on his discovery of equal areas at equal times, it is very likely that he went back and looked at those values again, and may have changed those values based on the ellipse that he, or the elliptical nature, the elliptical equation that he derived in chapter 57. It is possible that he did that. It might even be likely that he did that. Again, this is because of he had to make certain approximations because of the difficulty involved with this. What Kepler's biggest problem was, or what he could be accused of, is failing to be clear on his own methodology. So this fraud that Austin is talking about is overblown. And that is just talking about the work itself. That is not talking about the success of Kepler's laws from their inception to the present day. Kepler's laws have been extremely accurate in determining the motions of heavenly bodies in the classical regime. I don't know of any case where if you have a body that is moving slowly outside of a strong gravitational field, that Kepler's laws do not hold. So this entire presentation is misleading and inaccurate.
He had to intentionally manipulate the actual data. So what he did was make computational assumptions, so theoretical assumptions based on his proposed idea that wasn't working. He couldn't get.
He made mathematical approximations, which, as any mathematician, well, any physicist using mathematics will tell you, is appropriate given certain constraints. Again, because of the size of the errors of Tycho's observations, Kepler knew that he could take certain approximations because the end result, if he was absolutely precise, if he followed out the calculations as described by mathematics, the value that he would get would not be different enough from the value that he would get using the approximation within the error. Again, they would be statistically indistinguishable from one another. And so, if given the opportunity to cut a corner, a man's going to cut a corner. And I don't think he should be faulted for it. Particularly, again, because ultimately it makes no difference given the precision of the observations made.
It to work. He then computated it based on his assumptions and pretended that it was based on the input of observational data. This professor looked through it, and it wasn't caught until the 80s. Think about that. How many times do people say Kepler's laws, Johannes Kepler, spelled with a J, pronounced with a Y, Johannes Kepler, he proved it. Kepler's laws prove it. Explain Kepler's laws. I hear it all the time. Little do they know that Kepler's laws didn't even work with the observational data. Now, bit of a historical side note here, just so you know, he was the student of Tycho Brahe. Tycho Brahe actually is the one who compiled all the observational data. This is pre-telescopes, and so he had his own little mechanism that he used. It was this very diligent, based on the meridian and then the actual sidereal time that you made the observation. He would meticulously craft these observations over time, and it was this incredibly valuable resource at the time, and Kepler was basically underneath them. Now, there's a bit of a conspiracy as to he died after a banquet. This guy had a wild life. He got in a fight at one point, sword fight, had his nose cut off, and so he would walk around with like gold or silver fake noses on. But anyway, he kept working on astronomy and his geocentric model. And then you get into the fact that he went to a banquet and then he died. And then someone apparently, they took his remains and they tested his mustache in like 1991, and they saw that it had tons of mercury in there. And so it's speculated that he was actually poisoned. And some speculate that it was actually Kepler based on the small amount of people who had that close proximity to him and that banquet, etc. And of course, he stood.
So, I loves me some Tycho. Tycho is the number one person on my dead astronomer / physicist whom I would love to go bar hopping with. He is the Tyrion Lannister of astronomy. He got his nose chopped off. Read the books. He was independently wealthy. He was extremely intelligent and arrogant. The dude was a blast, and he loved to party. He got his moose. He had a pet moose for one. I don't know if that's a really popular thing to do in Denmark, but the dude had a pet moose. Come on. Which he got drunk. Which, if you've ever had stoner roommates, and you have a cat, yeah, that cat's getting stoned. Because, hey, we all need to party. Loves me some Tycho. That story about about him dying after a banquet, that is true. The mercury poisoning, not so much. Yes, mercury was found in the hair samples from Tycho's body, but it was shown that the levels of mercury were not high enough in order to kill him. It is believed that he actually died from some kind of complication to his bladder, either a bladder infection or a ruptured bladder, because at the time it was inelegant for you to get up from the dining room or from the dining table before a person of higher station got up. And so he was, I think, entertaining a duke, and so he was of lower noble status than the duke, and the duke could hold his liquor. Tycho, not so much. Apparently he really needed to piss, and either because of that, his bladder burst, or he got a bladder infection, and from that he died. Which, honestly, is still kind of awesome.
Most a game because he got all of his teacher's data, all the observational data. He then took it and basically...
Tycho was not Kepler's teacher. Kepler was not an astronomer. Kepler was a mathematician. Kepler, in today's parlance, is a postdoc. Tycho wanted to make his model work mathematically. Tycho was a mathematician on top of everything else. The reason why he lost his nose is because of a dispute over a mathematical proof. He knew what he was doing with mathematics, but he couldn't get his model to work based on his own observations, so he hired Kepler to do it for him, because Kepler was the better mathematician. As it happens, Kepler could not fulfill that obligation, and in fact, Tycho's observations dictated what we now know as Kepler's laws. And yes, it is very possible, which he might be bringing up, that Kepler stole the data, because when Tycho died, his belongings went through a protracted probate dispute, and so Kepler was like, I ain't got time for this shit, and he stole it. At least that's how the story goes.
Stabbed him in the back, flipped all his data on his head, lied about the observational data not matching his computational assumptions, and he is propped up as a genius that mapped out the planets to this day, and he was patently fraudulent. So if I had just told the story, people would have claimed I'm lying, so I went ahead and just quoted the guy who actually did it. I do encourage you go read this. It's way worse than this.
I encourage you also to go read it. I also encourage you to read the papers by Toomer and the paper by Vonderbolt a couple of years after the fact that addressed these concerns. In fact, the second author, whose name I probably am butchering, calls into question Donohue's motivations, because again, Kepler is very open about the fact that he makes approximations. Donohue recognizes that Kepler is liberal in his use of approximations, and yet Donohue still believes that this amounts to fraud as opposed to simply cutting corners. So, but no, I was told this story, and I looked into it, and it is apparently factual that there is this discrepancy in Tycho's data. So well done. I think it was Space. Was it? I think it was actually, I don't know. It was either Simon Shack or Space Audit. Somebody put me onto this, and so I had to look into it. So if you were going to claim that Globers do not look into these things, I would like you to use this as a instance where that is not the case.
This quote, way worse than this quote when you go read it. Very interesting read. Again, that is Kepler's Fabricated Figures, Covering Up the Mess and the New Astronomy. And pretty interesting. If you're unfamiliar with Kepler, now you get it. Kepler's laws mapped out the planets, complete fraud. Now, we're really going to dig into this in future episodes about...
Georg is telling me that he lectured in astronomy in Graz before he moved to Prague. I will look into that. From everything I've read about, Kepler, he was not what you would call a astronomer in terms of. He was certainly not an observational astronomer by any stretch of the imagination. So it might be a semantic. This might be semantics, or it could be that I am just full of shit and just don't know Kepler as well as I think I do. So I have. I have this book, Eye on Heaven, by Owen Gingerich. Highly recommend. It's Eye of Heaven, Ptolemy, Copernicus, and Kepler. I read this ages ago. The thing that I love about this is that in this book, Gingerich presents evidence that Ptolemy actually was the one who fudged his data in order to get his Ptolemaic system to work. His Tycho was Hipparchus, and Hipparchus could not have measured the positions as accurately as Ptolemy claims that he did. But anyway.
Wait, does Kepler's laws actually work? Wait up, what's going on with Mars? And that may be one of the next episodes. Kepler always talks about Mars, Mars, Mars. He couldn't get Mars to work. You wait till I drop the bombshell about Mars on you guys. It's pretty devastating to any assumption that the Earth is moving through space. Okay, let's continue.
Can't wait to hear that.
So I just want you guys to keep up with this reoccurring theme here, right? We're told that Copernicus was a scientist. He was fighting the church, and he was scared to reveal his story because the church was going to get him, and he waited till his deathbed. But in reality, he was actually good friends with the church, bringing up his heliocentric theory over a decade before he died. He wasn't scared of anything. That's a complete and total lie. And similar to the occultic undertones of
No, it is in fact not a lie. Copernicus did wait until the end of his life to have his work published because he was afraid of the backlash that he might face from the Catholic Church. As to whether or not he proposed heliocentrism earlier, that I do not know. I will revisit the book and see and learn more about it. But I can say that the foreword of the Revolution of Celestial Bodies was not written by him, and in that foreword, there is basically a cover your ass statement where where the author of that foreword claims that the book is a mathematical description, basically a novel idea, but is not intended to be a actual description of physical reality. Basically, assuming that placing the sun at the center of the solar system is a good way to predict future planetary motions, but is not physical reality. So the assertion that Copernicus was not afraid of the church, I don't believe is accurate. But again, what does this have anything to do with the Copernican principle?
Some of the the older Catholic Church, he was a sun worshiper. So no, he wasn't scared of anyone. That's a complete lie. He didn't wait till his deathbed to propose heliocentrism. That's also a complete lie. He also puts in the preface and forward of his book that it's not even necessary that his theory is probable or true. He doesn't necessarily think that it is. It just makes the math really simple and easy to work out, and so that's why he did it. He didn't even necessarily.
As I said, he didn't write that. A friend of his wrote that when the friend published the work after Copernicus was dead.
They believe it to be true. People will now say, oh, he was a genius, he figured it out. That isn't what happened. But he did have a spiritual or religious and philosophical bias towards the idea the sun was in the center. He thought it was, again, the symbolic personification of enlightenment, illumination, apotheosis.
Let me ask this. He is claiming, or his criticism is that Copernicus had a philosophical bias for putting the sun at the center of the universe. What is the motivation for putting the Earth at the center of the universe again? If you are telling me that it is not a philosophical or a worldview that is motivating this, I'm going to question your sincerity. I will just put it that way. And please don't come back to me and say that there is no evidence that the Earth is moving, blah, 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 because we both know that that is, in fact, not accurate.
Path to being godlike. Okay. So that we were completely lied to about Copernicus in the mainstream to this day. Just Google Copernicus, Google what happened. Wikipedia will lie to you. All the Google searches will lie to you. Interesting. Why would they have to do that? Now we get...
All of the Google searches will lie to you. Interesting. Then how did you come up with this information? Have you read? Has Austin read historical records to arrive to this conclusion? And not used Google as a resource? Because apparently all Google lies. All Google information on Copernicus is a lie. So I would be interested to know which works he has read, which lead him to the conclusion that that everything that we've been told about Copernicus is a lie.
Into Kepler, same exact thing, completely lied about. They don't tell you that he blatantly committed fraud and fabricated the figures and the computational data and lied about the observational data. Why would they have to do that? Now here is the original copy of a piece of paper that has been only recently found, okay? And this is from Isaac Newton's Principia. Here's another copy of it. This is Newton's Principia, Proposition 43, Theorem 22, original handwritten page. This was only recently discovered in the 20th century, of course, written in the 17th century. And when it was published, this final page, the final proposition, was removed. I wonder why. Why are they tactically removing? Because if you write an entire proposition, one of the most famous writings ever, right? The Principia, Newton's Principia. Why would you're going to put something as the final thing you want the reader to read? The final thing. Why would someone remove that prior to publication? And why did it take hundreds of years for people to find out it was originally there? This is why. Because what it says is, in order for the Earth to be at rest in the center of the system of the sun. Wait, I thought Newton proved that the Earth was moving around the sun, knew it for a fact, proved it via gravity that he proved. In order for the Earth to be at rest in the center of the system of the sun, planets and comets, there is required both universal gravity and another force in addition that acts on all bodies equally according to the quantity of matter in each of them and is equal and opposite to the accelerative gravity with which the Earth tends to the sun. For such a force, acting on all bodies equally and along parallel lines, does not change their position among themselves and permits bodies to move among themselves through the force of universal gravity in the same way as if it were not acting on them. Since the force is equal and opposite to its gravity toward the sun, the Earth can truly remain in equilibrium between these two forces and be at rest. And thus, celestial bodies can move around the Earth at rest as in the Tychonic system. Again, that's Isaac Newton, Principia, Proposition 4.
Okay. I was not aware of this. I will put that out there at the very beginning. I was not aware that this existed. Therefore I have no idea why it was removed. I don't know what those crossed lines were, because obviously it was edited by hand. So I would be curious to know what was crossed out in this. I'm also interested to know if this is the entire proposition, because it seems to start off with something not in evidence. In order for this Earth to be at rest, that to me would indicate there was some discussion of whether or not the Earth is in fact at rest. But even if this is all true, even if Sir Isaac Newton believed that there was a force that pervaded the universe that connects all things. Sorry, I was trying to do Star Wars and I just completely forgot what the quote is. If he believed that there was another force, or postulated that there was another force, that's great. There's no evidence for it. Science is evidence-based. I don't give a hairy shit what Isaac Newton had to say on this subject. I care about what he can demonstrate. And one of the most beautiful symbiosis or coming together of theory and of an experiment or empiricism is Kepler's laws. Newton, if you use Newton's laws, you can derive Kepler's laws. Kepler's laws were found empirically. Again, he used Tycho's observations and was able to describe them through mathematical representations or descriptions. Again, the motion of an object in an ellipse with the sun being at one of the foci. Newton, given the supposition that gravity was a thing, which he described using his equation F equals g mm over r squared, using that, he was able to derive those equations without data. He was able to show that Kepler's laws are a natural consequence of gravity. That if you have gravity, if gravity is the central force which is propelling which is causing the acceleration of the star, or causing the acceleration of the planets around the sun, then you would expect to see the laws that Kepler derived. And in fact, he went a step further. Remember how I was saying that Kepler's laws could not tell you positions absolutely, or at least the radii absolutely. It was basically a ratio, that the ratio of the period squared is equal to the semi-major axes of the planets cubed. He could not tell you specifically what the distance was to any particular object without first knowing what the distance to the Earth was, center, some other reference benchmark. Newton's revision of the harmonic law, or the third law, actually does. Newton's revision says that that in fact the period and semi-major axis are related to each other, including a factor of proportionality known as the gravitational constant and the masses of the two orbiting bodies. This is foundational because it allows us to determine the masses of things directly or dynamically in the universe. We can determine one of the classic pieces of a classic astronomy lab is determining the mass of Jupiter based on the motions of the Galilean moons, using Newton's revision of Kepler's third law. So you take a physical principle, a physical phenomenon, derive the consequences of what would happen if you had two bodies acting via mutual gravitation, where one was moving with respect to the other, and you get Kepler's empirical laws. It's beautiful. It is. I cannot think of any other way where an empirical law was so nicely found by a theoretical one. So yeah. But again, here and that I give lots of shits for, or lots of fucks for, because he can show that, because he was able to demonstrate that mathematically, and we've been able to demonstrate his proposition or his description of gravity for centuries. The whole additional forces or whatever, that has not been demonstrated. And again, science is about demonstrable evidence, not the opinions of people. This is essentially a thought experiment, that if you want to keep the Earth at rest, what Newton is telling you is that you would need this kind of force in order to do that, while allowing gravity to act as he has described it.
43, Theorem 22. Not to overwhelm you, if you're new to a lot of this, I'm going to explain it. Newton proposed the idea of gravity. Now, really what he did was he took Kepler's laws and he just threw mass in there. He's like, okay, well, you mapped out the planets. I want to...
Wow, is that wrong? Composure. That is not what he did. It was one of my tasks as a grad student was to derive Kepler's equations, or Kepler's three laws, from Newton's formulation of gravity. He didn't just throw gravity at Kepler's laws. He didn't start with Kepler's laws. He looked at two bodies that were moving relative to each other and were accelerated by mutual gravitation. And then he described the motion of those two bodies in that situation. And lo and behold, that motion is identical to that described by Kepler's laws, with the notable exception of Kepler's third law. So this representation of what Newton did is just fundamentally wrong.
Figure out kind of how it's working, then we got to come up with some type of dynamic cause, a force. So, okay, what does all that stuff assumably have that we could claim is causing them all to move around each other in this ratio, this relationship? Matter. So I said, okay, well, we'll quantify matter. We'll come up with the concept to quantify the amount of matter. We'll call that mass. And we'll put that in your equation. We're going to add mass to your equation and claim that whatever it is.
Is he saying that Newton was the one who was the first person to conceptualize mass, that he essentially invented the concept of mass. Is that what I'm hearing? Because no.
Is that's causing these things to move around each other must be intrinsically a part of the matter, the mass. Now, he goes on to say that he doesn't even necessarily believe in this theory. He can't even understand or conceive of it, that it blows his mind, that if his theory has any semblance of truth, it must be a direct act of God, live time, causing this to be the case, live time implementing this property, because it couldn't actually be legitimized other than assumption. And
it is true that Newton did have a problem with the concept of action at a distance. He stood by gravity. He stood by his description of gravity because of the power that it had in showing how celestial bodies moved, and how, and also in reconciling, or rather, how it tied into Galileo's experiments. But yes, he did question or have a problem with, or was uncomfortable with, the idea that this force, which he described, was invisible, that it had action at a distance. But again, the science was telling him that that it existed. The fact that he was uncomfortable with the notion of action at a distance is irrelevant to the scientific process.
he goes on to say that now, if we were to take this idea of my gravity, this again is the final page that was removed prior to publication. If we take my idea of gravity, it still doesn't mean that the Earth has to go around the sun. Even if we assume that the sun is way bigger than the Earth, still doesn't mean that, because if there's an equal and opposite reaction, and he brings up the fact that the bodies, it would act on all bodies equally in along parallel lines, because of course you get the idea of Newton's laws of motion, that an object will continue in a straight path unless an outside force acts upon it. That's the classical Newton law, right? Like if you throw a baseball, it's going to continue straight unless an outside force acts upon it. And so he brings up this idea that if you take my idea of gravity, the Earth could still be in the center and truly establish a state of equilibrium if there was just an equal and opposite reaction to whatever we're calling gravity. If there was a force akin.
It is not an equal and opposite. I object to his use of the term equal and opposite reaction, because that is Kepler's third law, and gravity is in fact applicable to that. Effectively, the equal and opposite reaction is that if you apply a force to an object, that object will then apply a force of equal magnitude but opposite direction to the original object. That's how gravity works. Gravity will apply a force onto the moon, or Earth will apply gravitational force onto the moon. The moon will then also apply that same gravitational force onto the Earth. What Newton is stating here is that there is in fact a separate force that must occur in order for Earth to be the Earth to be held fixed. He is not stating that this force is a natural consequence of gravity. He is stating that this separate force must work in the opposite direction. That is it. So this is not a case that is applicable to Kepler's third law. I know Austin is not saying this, but he is using that terminology, which could lead someone to misidentify what he is stating. Again, this is not a case of equal and opposite reaction. This is a case of an additional force where the net force on the Earth is zero.
To that opposed it, that basically was the reciprocation, the reaction, the equal and opposite reaction. Then you could have the Earth in the center at equilibrium of the entire universe, with everything moving around it in perpetuity, right? You wouldn't really have to add anything else to it, and that actually the Earth could absolutely be at rest. Now, the reason this...
Again, that is not what Newton is stating in this proposition. Newton is again stating that in order for the Earth to be at rest, there must be an additional force in the system that works opposite to gravity and separate from gravity. You know what? Let me read this and make sure that I am not full of shit with this. In order for the Earth to be at rest in the center of the system of the Sun, the planets, and the comets, there is required both universal gravity and another force, in addition, that acts on all bodies equally according to the quantity of matter in each of them and is equal and opposite to the accelerative gravity with which the Earth tends to the Sun. For such a force, acting on all bodies equally and along parallel lines, does not change their position amongst themselves and permits bodies to move amongst themselves through the force of universal gravity in the same way as if it were not acting on them, since the force is equal and opposite to the gravity towards the Sun. So yes, another force. It is not an equal and opposite reaction for
This was removed, in my opinion, speculation, is because they pushed this guy as with the narrative that Kepler, in addition to Newton, proved heliocentrism, proved the Earth moves around the Sun. They proved gravity. That is not true at all. That is a lie. Now, this is every single major character that I've only given you just a little bit of, because I don't want the show to be super long. I want it to be digestible as the first episode. I'm giving you just a taste of each of the major characters we're told in the mainstream version of history, the mainstream story of what allegedly verified and discovered heliocentrism to be true, and all of it is a lie. It's all being tactically lied about. Why is that?
Why is that? And I'm going to be wrapping up here as well. I am now, I think, at the 2-hour mark or thereabouts, and I'm effectively halfway through this stream or through this episode, and like Austin, I want this to be digestible. I may, in fact, actually cut up the stream into smaller bits, but I will definitely be coming back and revisiting this in the next couple of days, work permitting. So this assertion that that we have been lied to, or that you have been lied to, is not accurate. Now, have certain things been may have been omitted? Is Copernicus in fact a sun worshipper? Maybe. I don't know. I'm not a historian. I'm an astronomer. But what I can tell you is that the Copernican system was no better or worse than the Ptolemaic system, but it also added information, which Austin did not specify, in that, again, the Copernican system was also able to give you distance estimates, again, as a ratio of the Earth, but it was also able to give you distance estimates, which the Ptolemaic model could not do. I've already gone over the Kepler fraud issue, which, again, does not illustrate that Kepler's laws are, in fact, invalid. It's just simply the worst thing that can be said is that Kepler cut corners and did not tell people that, did not explicitly state in this instance that he was, in fact, cutting corners. So, according to Cygnus, in the next episode, he promises to show Kepler's laws are incorrect. I am very much looking forward to that, because I do not know of any case where in the classical regime, or Newtonian regime, if you want, where Kepler's laws fail. So I am very much curious for this. Again, and then lastly with Newton came up with gravity. He fully was behind gravity. So I don't know what he is talking about in terms of there being a lie. Now, was Newton a geocentrist? I actually don't know. I assumed he wasn't, but maybe he was. Again, I don't care. What I care about is the science, not his particular opinion about whether or not the Earth was the center of the solar system. All I care about is what is the predictive nature, what is the descriptive nature of his work, not his opinions. Actually, I'm going to see if he answers the question why.
Why is that? Now, if you're intellectually honest, you're going to immediately retire all those talking points that exclude and omit these pieces of information you weren't previously familiar with. If you're not honest, you can keep repeating it. I do not care. I'm not here to proselytize. I'm here to show truth. truth seekers, the true information. Now here, if you're not new...
So he doesn't answer the question of why that was why that is the case, which to me is the ultimate question. Is he is making the positive claim that people are being lied to, that the populace is being lied to about Copernicus, Kepler, and Newton. So my question is, who is they? And I am recently in a conversation with somebody in my comment section about this sort of question, and the commenter's answer to that is that Austin is saying that they are the scientific community, and I can assure you that they are not. They are, as scientists, I have never seen one instance of active censorship among or dissemination of false information as a community. So when I want more of a specific answer than the scientific community. I want to know who within the scientific community is perpetuating these lies, that is causing this censorship to occur. You claim that Google is lying, that everything about Copernicus that you find in Google is a lie. Who is behind that specifically? And more importantly, why? And if the answer to that question is because they want to hide God, or if they want to make you feel insignificant, I'm going to revert to my inner 5-year-old and ask the question again. Why? Why do scientists want you to feel as if you're insignificant? They don't. But you seem to be asserting that that is the case. So, why? Who is it that wants to do this, and why is it that they want to do this? Because as a member of the scientific community, I can tell you that that is not actually happening. Now, you can either not trust me, or you can say that I'm delusional. I don't know how to respond to that other than to say that it's highly disrespectful. But and I would like to know your motivations for why you believe that I am either lying or delusional or what have you. So I am a part of they. So am I, apparently. Where am I going to go with this? So yeah, George Ellis. I've seen this before. And there is a certain amount of truth to this. I'll revisit this, but again, this is simply an opinion by George Ellis. This is not part of the scientific discussion. And it also, as I mentioned in a previous stream, when he says, I can construct you a spherically symmetric universe with the Earth at the center and you cannot disprove it based on observations, that is if you ignore time. Because there is a fundamental question that Flat Earth and geocentrists have been ignoring, and I have been accused of, in my discussion with Dr. Bennett, as to bringing up something that was not relevant. And that is, what was before the Earth? Science has an answer to that question. And that ties into that ties into the supporting evidence as to why the Earth cannot be the center of the universe. Or at least, it begs the question, why was the position that the Earth ultimately formed in the center of the universe prior to the Earth's existence? So yes. So yeah. That's basically all I've got to say on that. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for being here and following me through with this. Like I said, sometime in the rest of the week, I'm going to finish this off. There are about 30 minutes left in this video. And again, at the beginning of his video, Austin was basically talking about this conversation, and when he was saying how Globers are insulting, mocking, that sort of thing. And it seems to me that he would welcome an honest conversation. Well, Austin, if you want to have a conversation, then you need to not do what us Globers are doing. You need to knock off with the "if you're honest" kind of bullshit. Your qualifiers, your insinuations. If you've got a point, say it. Don't beat around the bush with it. Don't insinuate that if we don't agree with you that we're stupid. I don't care if the Globers do that to you. I'm not 5, and so therefore my behavior is my own and is not and I try to hold myself to having principles that are not based on how I am treated. I do not hold to treat others as they treat you. I treat others as I would want them to be treated. So, I guess that's all I got to say at the moment. Howdy, Al. So yeah. Stay tuned for more. I have Professor Park's PhD, and I make content on astronomy, science skepticism, and mental health, specifically my own. If you like this sort of content, please like, share, and subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications. If you would like to help me out as the observatory director here at George Mason University, please consider becoming a patron. All monies from my Patreon account go back into the observatory itself. If you would like to help me out and help me out in attempting to make this a somewhat second career, then please consider becoming a channel member and helping me out financially. You can also send me money through Patreon or through PayPal. All of that is in the description. So, with that being said, I will play my outro and sign off by saying peace out, clear skies. Or I won't play my outro. Thank you to my. The most important thing about my outro is to thank Judy Bassett, for whom is both a patron and a channel member. Dornaku, I believe, is also both a patron and channel member. Norman Dixon is a patron, and Bellywood is and Dr. Tapioca Weasel are also members of my channel. So thank you all for, thank you to them for your support.